I agreed to let my son's fiancée handle my medical paperwork because it was the responsible thing to do. At the time, I was still driving myself to work every morning at 6:10, still passing inspection sites, still paying my own bills. The first letter came on a Tuesday. It said I had missed an appointment I never scheduled. A week later, my supervisor stopped returning my calls. I noticed my house keys were no longer where I left them, and that's when I realized everything I believed about my own life was about to collapse. I didn't think of myself as someone who needed help. That's probably the first mistake people like me make. I'm 52 years old, and for most of my life I've been paid to notice what others overlook. Loose bolts, hairline cracks, procedures skipped because someone was in a hurry. I work as a senior construction safety inspector, the kind that gets called in when a project is behind schedule and the insurance companies start asking uncomfortable questions. My job is simple on paper. Walk the site, read the reports, ask the questions no one wants to answer, and decide whether a building is safe enough for people to enter without getting hurt. I've been doing it long enough to know that disasters don't start with explosions. They start with small compromises everyone agrees to ignore. That's probably why, when my life settled into what looked like a quiet routine, I didn't question it too hard. I live in Plano, Texas, in a one-story brick house at the end of a cul-de-sac where the lawns are trimmed on Saturdays and the trash cans all roll out at the same time on Thursdays. I bought the place after my divorce, back when Ethan was 16 and still tall and awkward, and pretending he didn't mind moving across town. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid. New roof, clean foundation report, no surprises. For a while, it was just the two of us. Then Ethan met Rachel. She came into our lives the way most permanent changes do, quietly, without announcement. At first, she was just the girl picking him up on Friday nights, waiting in the driveway with the engine running and a polite smile on her face. Later, she started coming inside. She remembered my name after the first meeting. She brought dessert when she stayed for dinner. She stacked her shoes neatly by the door without being asked. Those things matter more than people think. When Ethan graduated college and took a job with a logistics firm in Frisco, it felt natural that Rachel would move in. Rent was expensive. The commute was better from my place. We had the room. I told myself it was temporary, just until they saved up enough for something of their own. I meant it. I really did. Most evenings followed the same pattern. I'd get home around 6:30, wash the dust off my hands, and put a pan on the stove. Ethan would wander in later, tie loosened, phone still in his hand. Rachel usually beat him home. She worked remotely for a healthcare consulting company, the kind of job where the laptop stayed open on the kitchen table even after dinner. We talked about normal things: traffic on the Dallas North Tollway, the neighbor down the street who kept repainting his fence, whether the Cowboys had a real shot this year or not. Nothing felt forced. Nothing felt wrong. If someone had asked me then whether I trusted the people living under my roof, I would have said yes without hesitation. That trust showed up in small, practical ways. Rachel offered to organize household paperwork because she was already dealing with forms all day. She created folders on her laptop labeled utilities, insurance, medical. She scanned documents and backed them up to the cloud. When envelopes came in the mail with official-looking logos, she set them aside neatly on the counter and mentioned them after dinner. "You've got a couple things from Blue Cross," she'd say, casual, almost bored. "I'll put them with the rest." I didn't think twice about it. I hate paperwork. Always have. On job sites, I'm meticulous. At home, I prefer things to disappear. Sometimes she asked questions. Normal ones, I thought. "How long have you been with your current doctor? When was your last physical? Do you still take anything for that shoulder injury?" I answered without looking up from my plate. Nothing she didn't already know, nothing that felt invasive. She nodded, typed something into her phone, and moved on. Ethan didn't say much during those conversations. He never interrupted. He never looked uncomfortable. If anything, he seemed relieved someone else was handling it. On Saturdays, I did my grocery run early, around 7:30, before the store got crowded. One morning, I came back and found Rachel at the kitchen table with a stack of papers spread out like a card game. She looked up and smiled. "I hope you don't mind," she said. "I'm just consolidating some of this stuff. There's a lot of duplicate mail. I set the bags down and glanced at the papers. Bank statements, insurance summaries, a few medical forms I didn't recognize. That's fine, I said. Just don't throw away anything important. She laughed softly. I won't. I promise. At the time, it felt responsible, organized, the kind of thing people praised in couples counseling sessions and self-help books. The first moment of discomfort came so quietly I almost missed it. It was a Sunday afternoon, hot enough that the air conditioner never really caught up. I was in the garage checking the oil on my truck when Ethan stepped out and leaned against the doorframe. He looked tired, the way he did when something was on his mind, but he didn't know how to start. Rachel scheduled you a checkup, he said. I wiped my hands on a rag. She did? Yeah. Just a routine thing. She said it'd be good to have everything up to date. I shrugged. Sure. When? Next Wednesday. Morning. That should have been the end of it. Routine, practical. But something about the way he said it made me pause. Which doctor? I asked. He hesitated, just long enough to notice. A new one, I think. In network. Rachel found him. I nodded slowly. New doctors weren't unusual. Networks changed. Providers retired. It happened. Still, I felt a faint, irrational irritation, not anger, just the sense that a line had been crossed without anyone meaning to cross it. I can schedule my own appointments, I said, keeping my voice even. Ethan's shoulders stiffened. I know. She was just trying to help. I appreciate that, I said, and I meant it. Just tell me next time. He nodded, relief flickering across his face. Yeah, of course. We went back inside. The conversation dissolved into nothing. The air conditioner kicked on. The moment passed. Over the next few weeks, life continued on its smooth, predictable track. I went to work. Ethan worked late. Rachel cooked elaborate meals on Wednesdays when she wasn't buried in meetings. The checkup came and went, blood pressure fine. Labs mostly normal, according to Rachel, who read the results before I did. Doctor says stress can sneak up on people, she told me one night, rinsing dishes. You've had a demanding career. I smiled. That's one way to put it. She smiled back. There was no edge to it, no judgment. But small things began to shift. A voicemail from my supervisor asking me to confirm a site visit I didn't remember scheduling. An email forwarded by Rachel with the subject line, "Just for your information," and a string of medical terms I barely skimmed. Once, I looked for my spare house key, the one I kept in a small bowl by the front door, and found the bowl empty. "Did you move the keys?" I asked casually. Rachel glanced up from her laptop. "Oh, yeah. I put them in the drawer with the batteries. Safer there." That made sense. I let it go. At night, lying in bed, I told myself I was lucky. My son was building a life. The woman he loved was competent and thoughtful. My house was full instead of quiet. If there was a voice in the back of my head telling me to slow down and look closer, I ignored it. After all, nothing bad had happened yet, and I had built my entire career on the belief that if something was truly dangerous, the signs would be obvious. The first real change was time. Rachel started waking up earlier than I did. I noticed it because the coffee pot was already warm when I came into the kitchen, the digital clock blinking 5:42 instead of my usual 6. She'd be seated at the table, hair pulled back, laptop open, scrolling with one hand while sipping from a travel mug. "You're up early," I said one morning. "West Coast call," she replied without looking up. "Healthcare stuff. Always urgent. Thanks for watching." I grunted, poured my coffee, and went about my routine. It didn't occur to me to question it. Plenty of companies ran on Pacific time. Plenty of people liked to feel indispensable. What I didn't notice at first was how often my name appeared on her screen. Not in a dramatic way. Not in bold red warnings. Just lines of text scrolling past too quickly to read. Fields filled with dates and numbers that looked administrative. Boring. Official. The kind of thing people stopped seeing once they decided someone else was handling it. She stopped asking before doing things. At first it was little stuff. Switching the brand of my blood pressure medication because the pharmacy was out of stock. updating my online patient portal password because the system flagged unusual activity, changing the email address on file so everything goes to one place. Easier this way, she said. You've got enough on your plate. I didn't argue. I told myself it was efficient. That delegating wasn't weakness, that I trusted her. Trust is a strange thing. It doesn't announce when it's being used against you. A month after the checkup, I was called into my supervisor's office. Mark had been in construction safety longer than I had. Gray hair, square shoulders, the kind of guy who still printed emails. He motioned for me to sit and closed the door behind me, which immediately put me on edge. "What's going on?" I asked. He folded his hands on the desk. "We've had a couple concerns come in." "Concerns about what?" "Your recent site reports." I blinked. "Which ones?" "That's part of the issue," he said carefully. "There have been inconsistencies." He slid a printed document across the desk. My name was at the top, my signature at the bottom. The middle was filled with notes I didn't remember writing. Risk assessments flagged as incomplete. Follow-ups marked pending with no explanation. A recommendation I would never make under those conditions. I felt heat crawl up my neck. "This isn't right." Mark held up a hand. "I'm not accusing you of anything, but from a liability standpoint, we have to be cautious." "Did you call me before this?" I asked. He hesitated. "We tried. The number on file went straight to voicemail." "That's impossible," I said. "My phone—" I stopped. Rachel had updated my contact information to streamline things. I remembered her saying it in passing, like it was nothing. "I wasn't aware of any issues," I said, slower now. "I know," Mark said. "That's why we're putting you on temporary administrative leave, just until we sort it out." Administrative leave. The phrase sounded harmless, paid, procedural. But in my line of work, it carried weight. Questions followed it. Whispers. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Rachel was on a call when I walked in, headset on, nodding at something invisible. She muted herself when she saw my face. "You're home early," she said. "I've been placed on leave," I replied. Her expression shifted instantly, not shock, but something closer to concern, carefully arranged. "Oh," she said. "Did they explain why?" I told her. "About the report, the inconsistencies, the phone number." She listened, nodding, eyes focused, as if she were processing a puzzle. "That must be really stressful," she said finally. "I'm sorry." I waited for her to ask to see the document. She didn't. Instead, she reached for her laptop. "Do you want me to take a look at your files? Maybe something got mixed up." I hesitated. "Just for a second." "I can handle it," I said. "Of course," she replied smoothly. "I just meant if you want backup." That word stuck with me later. Backup. As if I were already failing. That night, Ethan was quieter than usual. He picked at his food, barely looking up. "Dad," he said finally, "Rachel mentioned you've been under a lot of pressure lately." I looked from him to her. "She did? She worries about you," he said quickly. "We both do." I forced a smile. "I'm fine." Rachel reached across the table and touched my wrist, briefly. "No one's saying you're not." The gesture was gentle, reassuring, almost affectionate. But I noticed something else then. She had my phone. Not in her hand, not obviously. It was sitting face down beside her plate, closer to her than to me. I couldn't remember putting it there. I said nothing. The days after that blurred together in a way that unsettled me. Emails arrived already read, voicemails marked as listened to. When I asked Rachel if she'd seen something, she answered easily, confidently. "Oh yeah, that one was just a reminder. They're still reviewing that. You don't need to worry about it." And it was her. Once, I opened my laptop and found my calendar filled with appointments I hadn't added. Therapy sessions, follow-up consultations, a neurological screening scheduled 3 weeks out. I stared at the screen, my reflection faint in the dark glass. "Rachel," I called. She appeared in the doorway. "What's up? What is this?" I gestured at the calendar. She glanced over, then smiled. "Oh. That. I synced everything so it wouldn't get lost. With the stress you're under, it helps to have structure." "I didn't agree to this," I said. Her smile faltered, just barely. I thought you'd appreciate it. Ethan appeared behind her, drawn by the tension. What's going on? Nothing, Rachel said quickly. Your dad's just feeling overwhelmed. I felt something tighten in my chest. I'm standing right here, I said. You can talk to me. And for us. They both looked at me then, and for the first time, I felt like I was on the outside of a conversation happening about my own life. I just don't want you burning out, Rachel said gently. You've been forgetting things. I have not. She tilted her head. You didn't remember the appointment letter last week. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. The letter. I remembered seeing an envelope. White. Official. I couldn't remember opening it. That night, I lay awake long after the house went quiet, replaying conversations, searching for gaps. I told myself everyone forgot things sometimes. That stress did strange things to memory, that this was temporary. Still, when I got up to use the bathroom around 2 a.m, I noticed the office door down the hall was ajar. Light spilled out. Rachel was inside, seated at my desk. She didn't hear me at first. Her fingers moved quickly over the keyboard, confident, practiced. The screen was filled with forms, my name, my date of birth, boxes checked, notes added. I cleared my throat. She jumped slightly, then turned. Sorry, did I wake you? What are you doing? I asked. She gestured to the screen. Just finishing something so you don't have to. I stood there, barefoot on the cool tile, watching her in the chair I'd used for years. What is it? I asked again. She closed the laptop gently, as if sealing an envelope. Nothing urgent. I nodded. I went back to bed. But sleep didn't come. For the first time, a thought surfaced that I couldn't push away. On job sites, when paperwork stopped matching reality, it was never an accident. And if I was losing track of my own life, I needed to know whether it was happening on its own or if someone was helping it along. The call came on a Wednesday morning at 8:17 a.m., which immediately annoyed me. That was the time I usually reserved for driving, not talking. I was halfway down Legacy Drive, coffee balanced in the cup holder, when my phone buzzed against the console. I didn't recognize the number. Normally I would have let it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. Daniel Brooks? A woman asked. Yes. This is Linda Morales, from Horizon Risk Solutions. I'm calling regarding an incident report filed under your license. I eased off the gas. What incident report? There was a pause, just long enough to feel intentional. You're not aware? No, I said flatly. Mr. Brooks, according to our records, you submitted a supplemental statement last Friday regarding the McKinney Ridge project. That statement triggered an automatic review. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. I didn't submit anything on Friday. Another pause. Papers shuffling this time. Our system shows the submission came from your verified email address and was uploaded through your inspector portal. That's not possible, I said. I was on site in Denton all day Friday. You can check the badge logs. I'm not disputing your location, she said carefully. I'm just telling you what the system reflects. I pulled into an empty parking lot and cut the engine. What exactly does the statement say? I asked. She hesitated again. It raises concerns about your cognitive clarity during recent evaluations. Specifically, it references lapses in recall and decision-making fatigue. The words landed like a physical blow. That's absurd, I said. I've never written anything like that. I understand this is upsetting, she replied. But until the review is complete, your inspection credentials are temporarily inactive. Inactive, not suspended, not revoked. The kind of word that sounded harmless until you realized it meant you couldn't work. How long? I asked. Standard review period is 30 days, possibly longer if additional documentation is requested. Documentation from whom? From your healthcare providers, she said, which we already have on file. My stomach dropped. You do? Yes. It was submitted alongside your statement. I ended the call without saying goodbye. For a long moment, I sat there, staring at the dashboard, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. My first instinct was anger. My second was panic. But beneath both was something colder, sharper. Recognition. Someone had used my name, my credentials, and my medical history to question my competence. And they had done it cleanly, through official channels, in a way that would be almost impossible to undo quickly. I drove home instead of going to the office. Rachel's car was in the driveway. That, too, irritated me. She usually parked on the street during work hours, claiming better reception. I let myself in quietly. She was at the kitchen table again, headset on, speaking in low, professional tones. "Yes, that should be sufficient," she was saying. "I'll forward the updated documentation today." She froze when she saw me. "I'll call you back," she said into the mic, then clicked mute. What happened? I didn't answer right away. I set my keys down carefully, took off my jacket, watched her eyes track every movement. "My license is inactive," I said finally. Her mouth opened slightly. "What?" "Horizon Risk received a statement under my name questioning my cognitive clarity," I continued, "along with medical documentation." Her face shifted through surprise, concern, and something else I couldn't quite place. "That doesn't make sense," she said. "Why would they have medical documentation?" "That's what I'd like to know," I replied. She stood up slowly. "Daniel, I haven't sent anything like that." I looked at her, really looked. Her posture was relaxed, her voice steady. If she was lying, she was good at it. "Then who did?" I asked. She hesitated. Maybe there was a mix-up. Systems glitch. It happens. "Not like this," I said. "This wasn't an accident." She crossed her arms, a familiar gesture. "Are you saying someone did this on purpose?" "I'm saying it didn't come from me." She nodded slowly, as if processing. "Okay, let's slow down. Stress can make things feel bigger than they are." There it was. That word again. Stress. "I want to see the files," I said. "All of them." She blinked. "Which files?" "My portal, my email, my medical records." She glanced at her laptop. "Some of that's password protected." "So am I said. Or I was. Quote, Ethan came down the hall, drawn by raised voices. "What's going on?" "Your dad's upset," Rachel said gently. "There's been a misunderstanding at work. A misunderstanding that just cost me my ability to do my job," I snapped. Ethan's eyes widened. "Dad, maybe you should sit down." I turned on him. "Don't." The word came out sharper than I intended. He flinched. "I'm fine," I said, forcing myself to breathe. "I just want transparency." "Will." Rachel stepped between us slightly, subtle but deliberate. "We can fix this. We just need to cooperate with the review." "I didn't agree to a review," I said. "I didn't agree to any of this." She placed a hand on my arm. "You don't always know what you agree to when you're overwhelmed." I pulled my arm away. That afternoon, I drove to my primary care clinic without telling anyone. The receptionist greeted me by name, cheerful as ever. "You're here early for your follow-up." "I don't know." "Follow-up," I repeated. "Yes," she said, tapping at her keyboard. "Your cognitive screening. Dr. Patel requested an additional assessment." "I never requested that," I said. She frowned. "It was scheduled online through your patient portal." "I want to see my records," I said. "All recent notes." She hesitated, then printed a stack of papers and slid them across the counter. I scanned the pages, my pulse pounding. Symptoms I hadn't reported, concerns I hadn't voiced. A note stating that I had expressed difficulty managing daily responsibilities. Signed by Dr. Patel. "I didn't say this," I said. The receptionist looked uncomfortable. "If there's an error, you'll need to address it with the provider." "I want to speak to him," I said. "Now." She shook her head. "He's booked through next week." I walked out with the papers clutched in my hand. In my truck, I read them again, slower this time. The language was careful, non-accusatory, enough to raise concern without making a definitive claim, enough to justify oversight, enough to create a narrative. That evening, I waited until the house was quiet. Rachel had gone upstairs. Ethan was in his room. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, the printed records beside me. I tried logging into my email. Incorrect password. I tried again. Incorrect password. I clicked reset password. The recovery email was unfamiliar. I stared at the screen. The address ended in my name, but it wasn't mine. A cold calm settled over me. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I didn't shout. I simply sat there, hands flat on the table, understanding something fundamental. On construction sites, when a worker's judgment is questioned, it's rarely about safety alone. It's about control. Remove their authority, and everything else follows. Someone had decided I was a liability, and they had started the process of removing me methodically, legally, and with my own information as the weapon. Upstairs, I heard footsteps. Rachel paused at the top of the stairs, then came down slowly. "You should get some rest," she said. "Tomorrow will be a long day." I nodded. "You're right." She smiled, relieved. As I turned off the kitchen light and headed down the hall, I made a quiet decision. If someone was documenting my decline, then I would stop correcting the record. I would let them keep writing their story, and I would pay very close attention to how far they were willing to go. The neurological clinic was 20 minutes away, tucked between a pediatric dentist and a yoga studio in a strip mall that smelled faintly of eucalyptus and coffee. I arrived 10 minutes early and sat in my truck with the engine off, watching people come and go. Mothers with clipboards, an older man leaning on a cane, a young woman in scrubs scrolling on her phone. Nothing about the place suggested danger. That, I would learn, was the point. Inside, the air was cool and overly bright. The receptionist smiled as if she already knew me. "Good morning, Mr. Brooks. Rachel signed you in online," she said, handing me a clipboard anyway. "Just need your signature here." I looked down. The form authorized information sharing with a designated caregiver. The box was checked. "I didn't agree to this," I said. She glanced at the screen. "It's already on file." I took the pen and signed my name beneath the printed one that wasn't mine. The ink looked darker, more real. Rachel arrived 5 minutes later, breathless in a convincing way, hair slightly out of place as if she'd rushed. "I hope I didn't miss anything," she said, touching my shoulder lightly. Traffic was a mess. The nurse called my name and gestured us back together. Rachel stood immediately. I stayed seated for a beat, then followed. The exam room was small and immaculate. A single window, a chair for the patient. A second chair positioned just behind it, angled toward the doctor's desk. Rachel took that one without asking. Dr. Harris was younger than I expected. Early 40s, calm voice, direct eye contact. He shook my hand firmly and smiled. "Daniel," he said, "I've reviewed your file. I wondered which version." He began with routine questions. Date, location, simple math. I answered easily. He nodded, jotting notes. Then he shifted. "Your records indicate some recent concerns about memory lapses and executive functioning," he said. "Can you tell me about that?" "I can tell you I never reported any," I replied. Rachel leaned forward slightly. "Daniel, you mentioned forgetting your appointment letter last week." I didn't look at her. "I don't recall saying that to the doctor." Dr. Harris raised a hand gently. "It's okay. There's no right or wrong answer here." He proceeded with tests, word recall, pattern recognition, timed tasks. I performed well. Not perfectly, but well enough that I could see his interest sharpen. "Your results are within normal range," he said finally. "Some mild variability, but nothing unexpected given your age and occupational stress." Relief flickered through me. Then Rachel spoke. "He's been under a lot of pressure," she said. "Work issues, sleep problems. He gets disoriented sometimes in the evenings." I turned to her. "That's not accurate." She met my gaze, concern etched perfectly into her face. "Daniel, you asked me yesterday what day it was. I didn't remember that. I didn't remember not remembering it, either." Dr. Harris watched us carefully. "Stress can present in subtle ways," he said. "Often patients don't notice the early signs themselves." "I'm noticing this," I said. "Right now." He nodded. "And that's good. Awareness matters." The appointment ended with no diagnosis, just recommendations. Follow up in 6 weeks. Monitor stress. Consider a short course of evaluation if symptoms progressed. Rachel thanked him profusely. In the parking lot, she exhaled like someone who'd been holding her breath. "That went well," she said. "For whom?" I asked. She blinked. "For you, the doctor didn't see anything alarming. Then why did you push the narrative? I said. Why did you contradict me in there? She frowned. I wasn't contradicting you. I was providing context. Context I didn't agree to. She crossed her arms. Daniel, if you're not willing to accept help, people are going to worry. People? I echoed. She softened her voice. Your son, your employer, doctors. I stared at her, something cold settling in my chest. That evening, an email arrived from Horizon Risk. Subject: Request for additional documentation. They thanked me for my cooperation and informed me that, based on recent healthcare updates, the review period would be extended. They requested consent forms for ongoing medical monitoring. Rachel forwarded it to me before I saw it in my inbox. Just a formality, she wrote. I'll handle it unless you want to. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed the email and added it to a growing stack in my desk drawer. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern intensified. Appointment reminders appeared without my input. Prescriptions were adjusted, per provider recommendation. Notes were added to my medical file that framed my resistance as lack of insight. Each action, taken alone, was defensible. Together, they formed something else. A story. Ethan grew distant, not hostile, just cautious. When I challenged something Rachel said, he intervened gently. She's trying to help, Dad. Maybe listen to her. You've been stressed. One night, after dinner, I found him standing in the doorway of my bedroom, hands shoved into his pockets. Rachel's worried about you, he said. I know. She thinks maybe you should step back from some responsibilities. Let things settle. I sat on the edge of the bed. Is that what you think? He hesitated. I think. Maybe you've been carrying too much for too long. I nodded slowly. Did she ask you to say that? His jaw tightened. She didn't have to. That was worse. A letter arrived from my insurance provider the following week. It confirmed a change in my coverage status due to documented cognitive concerns. Certain benefits were now contingent on compliance with treatment recommendations. I held the letter in my hands and felt something fundamental shift. This was no longer about perception. It was about access, about rights. That night, I waited until Rachel went to bed. Then I opened her laptop. I knew the password. She'd typed it often enough beside me, never thinking I was watching. It opened easily. Her desktop was immaculate, folders labeled clearly. Work, personal, shared. I clicked shared. Inside were subfolders with my name. Medical, employment, legal. I didn't open them right away. I sat there, breathing, listening to the hum of the refrigerator down the hall. When I finally clicked medical, a spreadsheet opened. Dates, providers, notes. Each entry corresponded to an interaction I remembered or thought I did. A conversation reframed, a hesitation logged, a question turned into a symptom. The tone was neutral, professional, damning. I closed the laptop without opening anything else. Upstairs, Rachel shifted in her sleep. I stood there in the dark kitchen, understanding something new. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't overreach. It was preparation. Someone was building a case that I couldn't be trusted to manage my own life. And the most dangerous part wasn't the paperwork. It was how reasonable it all looked. The next morning, I let Rachel schedule another appointment without comment. I thanked her when she reminded me to take my medication. I nodded when Ethan asked if I was feeling okay. I began to play the role they were writing for me. Because if this was a system designed to measure decline, then my resistance would only accelerate it. And I needed time. Time to see how far they planned to go. Time to understand what they wanted once I was officially unfit. Time to decide what I was willing to lose to stop them. On job sites, the most dangerous moment isn't when the structure fails. It's when everyone agrees it's already compromised and keeps building anyway. I was still standing, but the foundation beneath me was being quietly rewritten. Once you stop pushing back, people stop pretending they're asking. That was the lesson I learned in the weeks that followed. The moment I eased into the version of myself Rachel seemed to expect, the tension in the house evaporated. She stopped watching me so closely. Ethan smiled more. Conversations softened, as if we had all silently agreed that things were finally being handled the right way. I let it happen. I slept later, not because I needed to, but because Rachel adjusted the morning schedule. Breakfast appeared at the same time every day. Pills set beside my coffee in a small plastic organizer labeled with the days of the week. I checked them carefully at first. They were what she said they were: blood pressure, supplements, nothing overt. The control wasn't chemical. It was procedural. Rachel began speaking for me in small ways. At first, it was with strangers. When the insurance representative called, she took the phone from my hand before I could answer. "He gets confused with details," she said warmly. "I'll handle it." When the electrician came to fix a flickering outlet, she stood between us in the hallway and explained the issue as if I weren't there. "Daniel forgets which breaker goes where," she said lightly. "I keep notes." I didn't correct her. Then she started doing it with people who mattered. My sister called one evening. I hadn't heard from her in months. Rachel answered the phone. "Oh, hi, Linda," she said. "Daniel's resting right now. He's had a long day." I listened from the living room as they spoke. Rachel's tone was calm, concerned, convincing. "Yes, we're keeping an eye on things. No, nothing serious. He just needs support." When she hung up, she smiled at me. "Your sister worries too much." I nodded. Later that night, I checked my call history. Linda's name wasn't there. Either the call hadn't been logged, or it had been deleted. At work, or what remained of it, I became a ghost. My administrative leave turned into pending review. Emails came less frequently. When they did, they were addressed to Rachel as well as me. Caregiver contact included per request. I didn't remember requesting that. Rachel framed it as helpful. "They just want to make sure nothing slips through the cracks," she said. "You don't want misunderstandings, right?" What I wanted didn't seem relevant anymore. Gaslighting isn't dramatic. It doesn't feel like someone shouting that you're wrong. It feels like a dozen small confirmations that everyone else agrees on something you don't remember consenting to. One afternoon, I found a sticky note on the fridge. "Doctor at 3. Bring insurance card." I stared at it longer than necessary. "I didn't know I had an appointment today," I said when Rachel came in. She paused, then smiled gently. "We talked about it last night." "No, we didn't." Her smile didn't change. "You were tired." Ethan overheard us from the hallway. "Dad, it's okay," he said. "You've been forgetting things lately." I turned to him slowly. "Have I?" He hesitated, then nodded. "A little." The word hung in the air. Later, alone in my room, I replayed the previous night in my head. Dinner, the news, Ethan leaving early, Rachel cleaning up. We hadn't talked about any appointment. I was sure of it, but certainty, I was learning, carried no weight without witnesses. At the doctor's office, Rachel sat beside me again. The same position, the same angle. The doctor, a different one this time, asked general questions. Rachel filled in gaps I didn't agree existed. "Evenings are harder," she said. "He gets disoriented." The doctor nodded sympathetically. "That's common." Common, that word again. On the drive home, I stared out the window and said nothing. I had begun to notice something else by then, a pattern beneath the pattern. Rachel never outright lied about anything verifiable. She didn't invent events. She reframed them. A missed email became overlooked communication. A disagreement became emotional agitation. A boundary became resistance to care. Every objection I raised fit neatly into the narrative she was building. So I stopped objecting. Instead, I started watching. I paid attention to when she typed notes on her laptop after conversations. I noticed how she asked leading questions, always with witnesses nearby. "You're feeling overwhelmed, right? You've been tired lately, haven't you?" It's hard to keep track of everything, isn't it? If I answered no, she frowned slightly and moved on. If I answered yes or even hesitated, she nodded and typed. Once, when she thought I was asleep on the couch, I heard her on the phone in the kitchen. "Yes, that's consistent," she said quietly. "I've been documenting everything." I didn't hear the rest. Ethan began deferring to her completely. He checked with her before making plans. He asked her if it was okay for me to drive alone. "Just until things stabilize," he said. "Stabilize from what?" I asked. He looked uncomfortable. "From everything, the house itself changed. Not physically, but functionally. My office door was kept closed more often. My old files disappeared from the shelves. When I asked about them, Rachel said she decluttered. "It's easier on your mind," she explained. I didn't argue. One evening, while Rachel was upstairs showering, I opened the desk drawer where I'd been keeping my printed emails and letters. The stack was thinner. Several documents were gone. I flipped through what remained, my hands steady. She had been cleaning more than clutter. I replaced the papers carefully and closed the drawer. From that night on, I stopped leaving physical evidence where it could be found. I took photos of everything: emails, letters, notes. I emailed them to an account Rachel didn't know about, one I created on a library computer across town. I kept my face neutral. My response is mild. "Yes, you're right. I must have forgotten. Thank you for reminding me." End quote. The more compliant I became, the faster things moved. Rachel mentioned, almost casually, that it might be time to formalize things, just in case. "Power of attorney," she said over dinner. "Temporary, for emergencies." Ethan nodded. "It makes sense, Dad." I chewed slowly, buying time. "Let's talk about it later." She smiled. Of course. That night, I lay awake listening to the house settle. Pipes creaking, the faint buzz of Rachel's phone as notifications came in. I thought about my work, about the reports I used to write, about how easy it was to make a structure look sound on paper while cutting corners underneath. That was what she was doing, creating documentation strong enough that no one would question it until it was too late. The next morning, Rachel handed me a cup of coffee. "Drink this while it's hot," she said. "You forget sometimes." I took it, sipped, set it down. "I've been thinking," I said. She looked up, alert but composed. "About what?" "About stepping back," I said carefully. "Letting you handle more." Her eyes softened. "That's probably for the best." "I trust you," I added. The words tasted strange in my mouth. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I know." As she turned away, I caught a glimpse of something in her expression. Not relief, satisfaction. And in that moment, I understood the real danger I was in. This wasn't about my health, or my stress, or even my job. It was about control, about who would be believed once I officially stopped being seen as reliable. I had spent my career preventing collapses by catching problems early. Now I was inside one, and everyone around me was calmly reinforcing the scaffolding, convinced it was there to keep me safe. The evidence didn't announce itself. It didn't arrive in a dramatic envelope or flash across a screen with a warning. It surfaced the way truth usually does by accident, when someone grows careless. Rachel left her phone on the kitchen counter while she took a shower. That alone wasn't unusual. She trusted the house. She trusted the version of me she had helped create. The compliant one. The quiet one. The man who nodded and forgot. The phone buzzed once, then again. I ignored it at first. I was standing at the sink, rinsing my mug, watching steam curl into the air. When it buzzed a third time, the screen lit up. Care coordination. Follow-up needed. I didn't touch it. I just read the preview line. Per our last conversation, please confirm patient compliance before proceeding. My pulse stayed steady. Years of site inspections had taught me how to move slowly when something looked unstable. I dried my hands, picked up the phone, and unlocked it. She'd changed her passcode recently, but not the pattern. Muscle memory betrays people. The screen opened easily. The message thread was longer than I expected. It wasn't a single conversation. It was a record. Dates, times, names. A representative from my insurance provider. A case manager I didn't recognize. A legal assistant from a firm downtown. Short, precise exchanges, written in professional language. No insults, no malice, just coordination. He's been cooperative lately. Symptoms appear more consistent in the evenings. We're moving toward next phase if documentation supports it. I scrolled carefully. One message stopped me cold. Spoke with son today. He agrees increased oversight is necessary. I stared at the words until they blurred. Ethan. I locked the phone and placed it back exactly where I'd found it. The counter was cool beneath my palm. The house hummed softly, indifferent. Rachel came downstairs 20 minutes later, hair damp, wrapped in a robe. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Fine," I said. "Just making coffee." She smiled, glanced at her phone without picking it up, and went to her desk. I spent the rest of the day moving through the house like a guest, polite, invisible, observing details I'd missed before. The printer tray held fresh paper, though no one had printed anything recently. Her laptop browser history had been cleared again. A folder on the shared drive had been renamed from shared to archive. That night, after everyone went to bed, I drove to the 24-hour pharmacy near the highway. Fluorescent lights, empty aisles, the kind of place no one lingered. I bought a cheap burner phone and paid cash. Back in my truck, I sat with the receipt crumpled in my fist, grounding myself in the mundane reality of it. This wasn't paranoia. This was preparation. Over the next few days, I started creating friction in small, controlled ways. I missed a reminder Rachel sent me and apologized profusely. I asked the same question twice during dinner. I thanked her for things she hadn't done. Each time, she reacted the same way: concerned, patient, documenting. She was collecting moments. I needed something she hadn't curated. The opportunity came on a Friday afternoon when a courier arrived with a certified letter. Rachel wasn't home. Ethan was at work. I signed for it myself. The envelope bore the letterhead of a legal firm in downtown Dallas. Inside was a notice of intent, not a lawsuit. Not yet. A preliminary filing outlining concerns regarding my capacity to manage certain financial and contractual obligations. It referenced my employment review, my medical evaluations, statements from interested parties. One paragraph caught my attention. Documentation includes supplemental notes uploaded on June 14th at 9:42 p.m. June 14th, a Friday. I'd been on site in Denton that day, then home by 7. I remembered because Ethan had grilled steaks and we ate on the back patio. At 9:42 p.m., I'd been in the living room watching a documentary with the volume low. Rachel had been at the table with her laptop. I didn't confront her. Instead, I turned on the old desktop computer in the garage, the one I used for nothing important, the one Rachel had never touched. It still had access to my inspector portal. I logged in without issue. The activity log was still there. June 14th, 9:42 p.m. User upload. Supplemental statement added. IP address listed. I copied it down. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to the public library. The reference desk was staffed by a woman in her 30s with tired eyes and a cardigan draped over her chair. She looked up when I approached. "Can I help you?" "I need to check an IP address," I said. "Just the general location." She hesitated. "We can't track individuals." "I don't need individuals," I said. "Just whether it's residential or commercial." She nodded and gestured to a computer. "You can use this." I typed it in. The result came up immediately. Residential, Plano, Texas. The ISP matched our provider. I sat back, the chair creaking softly. That wasn't enough to prove intent, but it was enough to prove access. That night, I waited until Rachel was on a call in the living room. Her voice carried, low and soothing. "Yes, he's been stable today. No incidents. I'll send the updated notes tonight." I slipped into the office and opened the filing cabinet she rarely locked. Inside were manila folders, neatly labeled. My name, my employer, my insurance, and one folder I hadn't seen before. Contingency. Inside was a draft document. Not finalized, not signed. A petition for temporary guardianship. Rachel's name listed as proposed guardian. Ethan's signature block beneath it. Unsigned. I closed the folder carefully and put everything back exactly as I'd found it. When Rachel ended her call, she looked up and smiled at me. "You should head to bed," she said. "You've had a long day." I nodded. "You're right." In the bedroom, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to her move around downstairs. I wasn't angry yet. Anger would come later. What I felt then was clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't even exploitation in the traditional sense. It was a process, a slow, legal erasure. And the most dangerous part wasn't Rachel. It was the fact that she hadn't needed to force anyone. The systems were built to accept this kind of story. Concerned caregivers, cooperative patience, adult children doing the responsible thing. By the time anyone asked the wrong questions, the answers would already be on file. I rolled onto my side and closed my eyes. If this was a case being built, then I needed to understand its timeline, not to stop it, but to decide when to let it finish. Because in construction, there's a moment before a controlled demolition when you don't rush to save the structure. You step back. You make sure no one innocent is inside. And you wait for the right wall to fall. Knowing the shape of the trap didn't make it any less suffocating. If anything, it made every movement feel heavier, as if the air itself had thickened around me. I didn't sleep much after finding the contingency folder. When I did drift off, my dreams were procedural forms filling themselves out, signatures appearing where hands never touched paper. I woke before dawn and sat at the edge of the bed, listening to the house breathe, pipes ticking, the faint whir of the refrigerator. Rachel's steady rhythm downstairs as she started her day early, like always. By the time Ethan came into the kitchen, I was already dressed. "Morning, Dad," he said, yawning. "Morning." He poured coffee, glanced at me, then at Rachel. There was a silent exchange between them I pretended not to see. Rachel slid a plate of toast toward me. "Eat something. You forget when you're anxious." I smiled faintly and took a bite. The toast was cold. Ethan cleared his throat. "I talked to HR yesterday." My hand paused mid-chew. About your leave. They're concerned. But they said if you focus on getting better, things could work out. "Better," I repeated. He nodded. "They just want documentation." Rachel rested her hand on his arm, supportive. "That's reasonable." I swallowed. "What did you tell them?" Ethan hesitated. "That you've been under a lot of stress. That you're open to help." The words landed with a dull thud. "Did you say anything else?" I asked. He looked down into his cup. "I said you've been forgetting things." Rachel squeezed his arm again. He didn't mean it as a criticism. I didn't respond. There was no point. Later that morning, my sister Linda showed up unannounced. She hadn't called ahead. She hadn't texted. Her car was just suddenly in the driveway, her familiar knock echoing through the house. Rachel answered the door first. "Oh, Linda," she said, surprised but smiling. "What a nice—" "Where's my brother?" Linda cut in. I stepped into view. Her eyes flicked over me, sharp and assessing. "There you are," she said, relief and suspicion mixing in her voice. She hugged me briefly, then pulled back and studied my face. "You look thin." "I'm fine." She glanced past me into the house. "Can we talk?" Rachel opened her mouth. I spoke first. "Sure," I said. Out back, Linda followed me to the patio, the Texas heat already pressing down. We sat at the small table Ethan had sanded and refinished years ago. "I got a call," she said without preamble. "From Rachel." My jaw tightened. "She said you've been having trouble," Linda continued. "Memory stuff, work issues. She also said you were overwhelmed and didn't want to worry anyone," Linda said. "That you'd asked her to help manage things." I stared at the fence line, at the small crack near the base where the soil shifted every summer. "I didn't ask her," I said quietly. Linda's expression changed. "That's not what she told me." "I know." Silence stretched between us. "You forgetting things?" she asked finally. "No." "Then why does everyone think you are?" That was the question, wasn't it? "I think," I said carefully, "that a story is being told about me, and it's being told in places I'm not present." Linda leaned back, crossed her arms. "That's a serious claim." "I know." She studied me for a long moment. "Are you asking for help?" I shook my head. "I'm asking you to listen." She nodded slowly. "Okay, I'm listening." I told her pieces. Not everything. I avoided the folder, the guardianship draft. I stuck to what could be confirmed: emails, appointments I hadn't scheduled, statements I hadn't made. Linda didn't interrupt. When I finished, she exhaled. "That's concerning," she said. "Yes, but," she added carefully, "Rachel seems genuinely worried." "That's the problem," I replied. "So does Ethan." Linda frowned. "Why would your own son?" "I don't think Ethan understands what he's part of," I said. "I think he believes he's helping." She went quiet again. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. Not yet. That's not how families work. It is if you want to keep one intact. She looked at me sharply. What does that mean? I met her gaze. If this turns into a fight, Ethan loses everything. His job, his relationship, his reputation. He'll be labeled as the son who tried to control his father. And Rachel? I hesitated. Rachel knows what she's doing. Linda stood up slowly. I don't like this. I know. I'm not going to pretend I didn't hear what you said. I'm not asking you to. She hugged me again, tighter this time. Call me if it gets worse. It already has, I said. But I will. After she left, Rachel approached cautiously. I hope that went well, she said. It did, I replied. She searched my face. You didn't upset yourself, did you? No. She smiled, relieved. Good. That evening, Ethan sat beside me on the couch while Rachel cleaned up in the kitchen. Dad, he said, voice low, I need to ask you something. Go ahead. If something were to happen, would you want Rachel to help manage things? The question was rehearsed. I could hear it in the cadence. I stared at the television. Muted. What kind of things? Appointments. Bills. Decisions if you're not up to it. And you? I asked. I'll be there too, he said quickly. Of course. But Rachel's better with paperwork. I nodded slowly. You trust her. He didn't hesitate. Yes. That hurt more than I expected. I trust you, I said. He smiled, relieved. That means a lot. Rachel joined us then, sitting on the arm of the couch. We're a team, she said. I smiled back. That night, alone in my room, I opened the burner phone and scrolled through the photos I'd taken. Documents, screenshots, dates, evidence enough to start a war. But wars don't just destroy enemies. They flatten everything around them. I thought about Ethan at 16, carrying boxes into this house, about teaching him how to sand that patio table, about the pride in his voice when he talked about his promotion. If I exposed Rachel now, publicly, legally, it would all come out. Every message, every document, every assumption, and Ethan would be right there in the middle of it. The truth settled in with brutal clarity. Rachel's plan wasn't just to control me. It was to make sure that if I fought back, I'd have to burn my son to do it. That was the leverage. That was why everything had been done so carefully, so quietly, with Ethan's agreement logged at every step. I lay back and stared at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me. In inspections, when a structure is compromised, you don't always evacuate immediately. Sometimes you shore it up temporarily, even knowing it will have to come down. Because timing matters. Because people matter. I wasn't deciding how to stop Rachel anymore. I was deciding how much of myself I was willing to lose to keep Ethan standing when it was over. And for the first time since this began, I understood the real cost. Not my job, not my independence, but my place as a father in my son's life. The rest of the plan would have to account for that. No matter what it took, once I understood the price, everything else became a calculation. I stopped thinking in terms of justice or exposure, and started thinking the way I did on failing sites, what could be reinforced temporarily, what had to be allowed to fail, and who needed to be kept clear of the collapse zone. The first thing I did was make myself smaller. Not visibly, not in ways that could be challenged. I didn't feign confusion or exaggerate symptoms. I simply leaned into the version of me Rachel already believed in, slower, quieter, deferential. I asked before doing things, is it okay if I drive to the store? Do we have anything planned today? Can you remind me later? Each question gave her exactly what she wanted, confirmation that her role was necessary. And each answer she gave was logged somewhere, even if only in her mind. Rachel relaxed. She started talking more freely around me, not carelessly, but without the guarded precision she'd used before. She answered calls on speaker. She left her laptop open when she went to the bathroom. She discussed timelines without realizing I was listening. We're almost there, she said once, pacing the living room with her phone pressed to her ear. He's been cooperative. The review board will want consistency for another few weeks. I sat in my chair, eyes closed, breathing evenly. Another few weeks. Ethan changed too. With my resistance gone, his anxiety eased. He joked more. He stopped watching me for signs of disagreement. In his mind, things were improving. One night, while we were loading the dishwasher together, he said, "You seem calmer." "I am," I replied. "That's good," he said. "Rachel said you might be feeling some relief now that you're not carrying everything alone." I nodded. She's right. The lie settled easily between us. Behind the scenes, I was preparing. I moved my most important files off my phone and onto the burner. I created duplicates and stored them in places Rachel never went: my truck's glove compartment, a sealed envelope tucked inside an old tool case in the garage. I stopped emailing anything sensitive. I wrote notes by hand and memorized dates. I also did something that surprised even me. I let Rachel schedule the capacity evaluation. She framed it as optional, but I knew better. It was the final step, the thing that would turn suspicion into authority. The appointment was set for a Monday morning. A panel, 2 clinicians, 1 legal observer. Rachel drove me herself. "You don't have to be nervous," she said, hands steady on the wheel. "This is just to confirm what we already know." "And what is that?" I asked mildly. "That you've been under a lot of stress," she replied. "That you need support." I smiled faintly and looked out the window. The evaluation took 3 hours. They asked questions I'd answered 100 times before, phrased slightly differently. They observed how I hesitated before responding. They noted when I deferred to Rachel for clarification. She spoke with confidence, never exaggerating, never lying outright. "He forgets small things," she said. "Appointments, names. Not always, but often enough that it worries us." Us. Ethan wasn't there, but his presence was implied in every statement. When it was over, the lead clinician thanked me for my cooperation and told me I'd receive a summary within 10 business days. Rachel squeezed my shoulder as we left. "You did great." Back home, I retreated to my room and closed the door. I wasn't angry. Not yet. What I felt was resolve. That evening, I made a decision that changed the direction of everything. I called a lawyer, not to fight, to understand how to lose correctly. His name was Martin Hale, late 50s, quiet voice. I found him through a legal aid referral, not a flashy firm downtown, someone who dealt with guardianship cases regularly. We met 2 days later in his small office, walls lined with thick binders and outdated certificates. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and folded his hands. "You're describing a situation where the system will side with the caregiver unless you contest it aggressively." "I know," I said. "If you contest it," he continued, "your son will be questioned. His statements will be scrutinized. If it comes out that he supported this process, even unknowingly, it could affect his employment, his background checks, his future." "I know," I said again. Hale studied me. "You're not asking how to win." "No," I said. "I'm asking how to step aside without giving her everything." He considered that. "There are ways," he said slowly. "Voluntary limitations, conditional powers, agreements that look cooperative but contain safeguards." "Safeguards for whom?" I asked. "For you," he said, "and for anyone who might challenge her later." I nodded. We talked for over an hour. About timing, about documents, about how appearances mattered more than intent. When I left his office, I felt lighter. Not because I'd solved the problem, but because I'd chosen the battlefield. Rachel received the evaluation summary the following week. She read it carefully, lips pressed together, then looked up at me. "It's mostly supportive," she said. "They noted some concerns, but nothing severe." "That's good," I said. She hesitated. "They recommend formalizing temporary oversight, just to be safe." "Okay," I said. Her eyes widened slightly. "Okay, I trust you," I added. The words landed exactly where she wanted them to. Ethan was relieved when we told him. "This is just paperwork," he said. "It doesn't change who you are." End quote. "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." Rachel drafted the agreement that weekend. Temporary, limited, specific. I asked a few questions, reasonable ones. Nothing that sounded like resistance. She answered confidently. When she handed me the pen, her hand trembled just slightly. "Take your time," she said. "I'm ready," I replied. I signed. The moment the ink dried, something shifted. Rachel didn't notice it right away, but I did. The power she'd been working toward had finally settled into place, and with it came a subtle carelessness. She started pushing boundaries faster, making decisions without explanation, speaking about me in the third person when she thought I wasn't listening. "He doesn't need to know about that. I'll handle it," he agreed. She was moving too quickly. That was the danger point, because when people believe they've won, they stop checking the load limits. One night, after Ethan went to bed, Rachel sat across from me at the kitchen table. "This is going to be better for everyone," she said. "You'll see." I met her gaze calmly. "I already do." She smiled. In my pocket, my burner phone vibrated softly. A message from Martin Hale. "Document filed. Safeguards active. Call when ready." I slipped the phone back into my pocket without looking at it. Rachel stood and cleared the table, humming to herself. I remained seated, hands folded, playing my part. Because the most important thing I'd learned in the past months was this. Sometimes, the only way to expose a collapse is to stop holding the structure up yourself. And sometimes, the bravest thing a father can do is step back. Not because he's weak, but because he's strong enough to carry the blame if it means his child doesn't have to. The strange thing about giving something up willingly is that everyone assumes you had no choice. In the days after I signed the agreement, people treated me differently, not with cruelty, but with a careful politeness that stung more than open hostility ever could. Conversations slowed when I entered a room. Decisions were explained to me the way you explain things to a child who might get upset. Rachel's voice softened permanently, like she'd switched to a setting she never intended to change back. "You don't need to worry about that," she'd say. "I've already handled it. Let's keep things simple for you." And I let her. I stopped driving unless she suggested it. I asked before using my own credit card. I sat quietly during phone calls that involved my name and nodded when someone asked if I understood. What surprised me was how quickly the world adjusted. Horizon Risk stopped emailing me altogether. My access to internal systems was revoked, pending further review, which everyone now seemed to accept as inevitable. My doctor's office began copying Rachel on every message. Even my sister Linda, who called once a week without fail, grew hesitant. "You sound tired," she said one night. "Maybe we should talk later." Later became never. Through all of it, Ethan stayed close. He checked on me every morning before work, poking his head into my room like he used to when he was a kid. "You okay?" he'd ask. "I'm fine," I'd say. And I meant it, at least in the narrow sense that mattered. Because while my life was shrinking, his was stabilizing. Rachel's calm certainty soothed him. The structure she imposed relieved him of decisions he'd never been comfortable making. Bills were paid on time. Appointments were scheduled. Problems were handled before they reached him. He slept better. I could see it in his face. That was when the real weight of the decision settled in. It would have been so easy to end this. One call to the right attorney. One email to the review board with the attachments I'd collected. Screenshots of messages, logs, dates, the guardianship draft. Rachel's composure would crack instantly. Her tone would shift from concern to defense. Ethan would be dragged into depositions and interviews, his words parsed, his intentions questioned. He'd say he was trying to help. They'd ask why he didn't ask more questions, why he didn't listen when I pushed back. And suddenly, his career would be paused, his relationship poisoned, his name attached to something ugly and public. I had seen that before. On job sites, when something went wrong, the youngest supervisor always took the hardest fall. Not because they were guilty, but because they were available. Ethan would be available. Rachel knew that. That was why she'd built everything the way she had. That was why she'd logged his agreement so carefully, never forcing him, always nudging. The trap wasn't just for me, it was for my son. That realization changed everything. One afternoon, Rachel sat across from me at the kitchen table with a stack of papers neatly aligned. "There's one more thing," she said, "just to make sure everything's clear." I glanced at the top page. It was a financial authorization, limited, but broad enough to matter. "I already signed the oversight agreement," I said. "This is just an extension," she replied smoothly. "It keeps things consistent." I picked up the paper, scanned it, then set it down. "Why?" I asked. She tilted her head. "Why what? Why now?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she folded her hands and leaned forward slightly. "Daniel," she said gently, "this works best when there's no confusion." Confusion. That word again. The catch-all. The justification for everything. I looked at her and saw, clearly for the first time, what she was afraid of. Not me. Ethan. She needed him protected from uncertainty, from guilt, from the possibility that he might step back and question how far things had gone. The authorization would remove even that small window. "I need some time," I said. She studied my face. "Of course." That night, I called Martin Hale. "I think it's time," I said. "For what?" he asked. "To make sure the safeguards actually protect someone other than me." There was a pause on the line. "You're sure?" "No," I said, "but I'm certain enough." We met the next morning. Hale laid out the options with the same quiet precision he'd used before. "If you contest now," he said, "you have a strong case. The documentation trail is questionable. Her communications cross ethical lines, too." "And Ethan?" I asked. He sighed. "Your son would be involved. There's no way around that." I nodded. "If you don't contest," Hale continued, "the safeguards we filed will trigger review eventually. Not immediately. But patterns tend to expose themselves." "How long?" I asked. "Months, possibly longer." I leaned back in the chair. I thought about Ethan as a teenager, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework while I reviewed site reports. About the way he used to watch me work, absorbing without asking questions. About how proud he'd been when he landed his first job. I thought about the nights he'd stayed up waiting for me to get home, pretending he wasn't worried. And I made my choice. "I won't contest," I said. Hale didn't argue. "Then we'll make sure you're protected." "No," I corrected. "Make sure he is." He looked at me carefully. "That may mean you're seen as agreeing with everything that happens next." "I know." "Was not a vat. And it may limit your options later." "I know." Hale nodded slowly. "Then we'll proceed accordingly." The next few weeks were the hardest. Rachel pushed forward with confidence now, expanding her control, tightening timelines. She spoke openly about future plans, about restructuring finances, about selling the house down the line. Ethan listened, nodding, trusting. I said very little. When Rachel asked me to sign something, I read it carefully and signed only what Hale had approved. When she suggested changes, I deferred politely. "You're doing great," she told me one evening. "This is exactly what cooperation looks like." I smiled. "I'm glad." Inside, I was counting. Every overreach, every assumption, every moment she stopped documenting as carefully because she believed the story was finished. The safeguards Hale had filed weren't dramatic. They didn't trigger alarms or investigations. They sat quietly in the system, like hairline fractures invisible to the naked eye. But systems notice patterns. One afternoon, Ethan came home early. Rachel wasn't there. The house felt different without her presence, lighter, somehow. "Dad," he said, sitting across from me, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you resent me?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. "Why would you ask that?" He stared at his hands. "I feel like I failed you." I took a breath. "You didn't?" But I went along with things," he said. "I trusted her." "So did I replied. He looked up. "Then why does it feel like something's wrong?" I considered my answer carefully. "Because sometimes," I said, "doing the responsible thing feels wrong when you don't know the whole story." He nodded slowly, as if that made sense. "I'm trying to fix it," he said quietly. I reached across the table and put my hand over his. "I know." I gasped. That was the moment I understood the full shape of the sacrifice. I wasn't giving up my independence to protect Ethan from consequences. I was giving him time to see for himself, time to notice inconsistencies, time to step back before the damage became irreversible. Rachel would eventually make a mistake. People always did when they mistook cooperation for consent. When that happened, the system would respond not with outrage, but with questions. And those questions would point not at Ethan, but at her. Until then, I would stay where I was. Quiet, limited, believed to be fading. Because the most dangerous assumption anyone can make is that a man who has stepped back has stopped watching. And I was watching everything. The day I signed the final agreement, The weather was clear and bright in a way that felt almost mocking. Blue Texas sky, no wind, the kind of morning that made everything look stable, even when it wasn't. Rachel laid the papers out on the dining table with deliberate care. Each page aligned, each signature tab marked with a small yellow flag. She had dressed differently that day, more formal, hair pulled back tighter than usual, as if she were going to a meeting that mattered. In a way, she was. "This is the last step," she said, voice calm, reassuring. "After this, everything will be simpler." I picked up the first page and read it slowly, even though I already knew every word. Temporary authority, conditional oversight, voluntary consent. The language was gentle, cooperative. It didn't accuse me of anything. It didn't strip me of rights outright. It just placed them somewhere else for safekeeping. "Do you have any questions?" Rachel asked. I looked up at her. "If I say no, what happens?" She smiled faintly. "Then we revisit it later." We both knew that wasn't true. Ethan stood nearby, hands in his pockets, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He looked uncomfortable, but not resistant. He believed this was necessary. He believed it would protect everyone. That belief was the final weight on the scale. "I'm ready," I said. Rachel slid the pen toward me. As I signed, I felt something detach inside me. Not pain, exactly, but a quiet severing. Like loosening a rope you'd been tied to for so long you'd forgotten it was there. When I finished, Rachel exhaled slowly, like someone completing a long task. "Thank you," she said. This was the responsible choice. Ethan nodded, relief washing over his face. "We'll get through this, Dad." I smiled at him. "I know." I was not feud. What neither of them realized was that the document I'd just signed wasn't the one that mattered most. The one that mattered had been filed 2 weeks earlier by Martin Hale, a voluntary consent addendum, embedded so deeply in procedural language that it barely registered to anyone skimming for authority. It limited Rachel's power in subtle ways, required secondary verification for major decisions, created audit triggers if patterns deviated from standard care, flagged certain actions for automatic review. It didn't stop her. It watched her. That afternoon, Rachel drove me to her office downtown so she could update records in person. I sat in the passenger seat, watching buildings pass, feeling oddly calm. The city looked the same. People walked, traffic moved. Life continued, unaware that my role in it had just been reduced on paper. Inside the office, Rachel introduced me as her father-in-law rather than by name. "He's doing much better now that we have support in place," she told a colleague. I nodded politely. On the way home, she stopped at a bank branch and went inside without asking me to come along. She returned 15 minutes later, satisfied. "Just tying up loose ends," she said. I didn't ask which ones. The changes accelerated after that. Rachel consolidated accounts, closed one credit line, opened another for emergencies. She spoke openly about selling the house in the future, maybe moving somewhere quieter. "This place has too many memories," she said. She began scheduling my days, fully appointments, walks, quiet time. She monitored my movements with casual questions. "Where are you headed? How long will you be? Do you want company?" I answered predictably. "I'll stay here." 2. "People? Not long." "That's fine." Ethan watched all of this without intervening. He trusted her. He trusted that I would speak up if something was wrong. That was the hardest part. One evening, after Rachel had gone out for a meeting, Ethan sat across from me at the kitchen table. "I hope you know we're not doing this to you," he said. "I know," I replied. "It just feels like things got out of control," he continued. "And now we're trying to manage it." I met his eyes. "That's a fair description." He frowned slightly. "You don't sound angry." "I'm not." "That worries me more," he admitted. I smiled gently. "You don't need to worry." But he did, because the shift was already happening, even if he couldn't see it yet. Rachel started missing steps. Not big ones, small ones. She skipped documenting minor decisions. She spoke more freely in emails. She assumed compliance without checking. The safeguards noticed. One morning, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Brooks," a man said. "This is Aaron Feldman with Allied Care Oversight. We're conducting a routine review." I glanced at the kitchen doorway. Rachel was upstairs. Yes? I said. We just need to confirm a few things, Feldman continued. Regarding recent changes in your care plan. He asked neutral questions, the kind that sounded harmless. Did I feel pressured to sign documents? Did I understand the scope of the agreement? Did I feel free to express disagreement? I answered honestly, but carefully. I agreed to everything presented to me, I said. I understood what I signed. I haven't objected. He paused. That's good to hear. The call ended. When Rachel came downstairs, she noticed the tension immediately. Everything okay? She asked. Just a call, I said. Routine. She smiled, but something flickered behind her eyes. From that day on, she tightened again, returned to documentation, slowed her pace. But it was too late. Once a system flags a pattern, it doesn't forget. The real twist wasn't that Rachel would be exposed. It was that when the questions finally came, they wouldn't be dramatic or accusatory. They would be procedural, boring, impossible to fight emotionally. They would ask why she'd moved so quickly, why she'd exceeded recommendations, why decisions had escalated after authority was granted, and they would do it without involving Ethan. That was the point. One night, Rachel sat beside me on the couch, scrolling through her phone. We're almost done, she said softly. Soon, things will be settled. I looked at her. What does done look like to you? She didn't answer right away. Stability, she said finally. I nodded. That's important. She leaned her head against my shoulder, a gesture meant to signal trust. In that moment, I felt an unexpected wave of sadness, not for myself, but for her, because she truly believed this was control. She didn't understand that real control didn't announce itself. It observed. It recorded. It waited. The following week, a formal notice arrived. Not to me, to Rachel. She opened it at the table, brow furrowing as she read. What is it? Ethan asked. Just a review request, she said quickly. Nothing serious, but her hands were shaking. She folded the letter and set it aside, forcing a smile. I'll take care of it. I watched quietly. The choice I'd made was irreversible now. I had given up my standing, my authority, my reputation. In exchange, I had preserved my son's future. Whatever happened next would happen without him in the line of fire. And that was the twist no one would ever see. They would think I lost. They would think I faded. They would never understand that sometimes the strongest move isn't to expose the truth. It's to step out of the way long enough for the truth to expose itself. The review didn't arrive like a storm. It arrived like mail, quiet, official, impossible to ignore once it was in your hands. Rachel received the second notice on a Thursday afternoon. I knew because she didn't bother hiding it this time. She stood at the counter, envelope open, reading the same paragraph over and over as if repetition might change the meaning. Ethan watched her from the doorway. Is everything okay? Yes, she said too quickly. Just routine follow-up. I have Dottie. But something had shifted. The confidence she'd worn for months no longer fit as easily. She moved with more precision, spoke with less warmth. Control, once established, had to be defended. That evening, she stayed up late at the dining table, laptop open, papers spread out in uneven stacks. I passed through the room quietly on my way to bed and caught a glimpse of the screen. Subject lines, deadlines, requests for clarification, not accusations, questions. Systems never accuse first, they ask. Over the next week, the house filled with that low-level tension you feel before a big inspection, the sense that everyone knows something is off, but no one wants to be the first to say it out loud. Rachel became meticulous again. Every conversation documented, every decision explained. She asked me to confirm things in writing, even trivial ones. Can you reply yes, so I have it on file? She'd say, phone already extended toward me. I complied. Ethan grew quieter. He didn't say anything at first. He just watched. Not me, her. One night, as we sat on the back patio after dinner, he asked, Did they contact you too? I shook my head. No. They emailed Rachel twice this week, he said. She said it's nothing, but it doesn't feel like nothing. I looked at him carefully. What does it feel like? He hesitated. like they're checking her work. That was the beginning. Rachel started taking calls in the garage instead of the living room. She closed doors she'd never closed before. She stopped answering emails at the table and retreated to the bedroom with her laptop. Control, when questioned, becomes isolation. One afternoon, while she was out, Ethan came home early again. He stood in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at the calendar on the fridge, the one Rachel updated religiously. "Dad," he said finally, "did you know she canceled your follow-up appointment?" I looked up from my book. "Did she?" "She told the clinic you were stable and didn't need it yet," he said. "But they called me by mistake to confirm." I closed the book slowly. "What did you tell them?" "That I didn't know about any cancellation," he said. "Because I didn't." Silence stretched between us. "That's new," he added. "She's never done that without telling me." I nodded. "People change when they're under pressure." He looked at me sharply. "Pressure from what?" I didn't answer. That night, I heard raised voices for the first time. Not shouting, not screaming, just tension leaking through controlled tones. "You didn't need to contact them directly," Rachel said. "They called me," Ethan replied. "I didn't initiate anything. You should have told me first. I didn't think it was a big deal." "It is," she snapped, then stopped herself. "It complicates things." "What things?" he asked. There was a pause, long enough to notice. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, counting breaths. This wasn't the moment to intervene. Intervening would turn suspicion into defense. Let the questions grow on their own. The next notice arrived by certified mail. Rachel opened it alone this time, in the bedroom. I knew because she didn't come downstairs for a long time. When she finally did, her face was pale, her movements clipped. "They want a formal interview," she said, addressing Ethan, but glancing at me. "Just to clarify some discrepancies." "What discrepancies?" Ethan asked. "Nothing major," she replied. "Documentation, timing, scope." "Scope of what?" She hesitated. "Of my authority." Ethan frowned. "I thought that was clear." "It is," she said quickly. "They just need reassurance." But reassurance wasn't what they were asking for. The interview was scheduled for the following Tuesday. A video call, 2 reviewers, 1 observer. Rachel prepared obsessively. She rehearsed answers out loud when she thought she was alone. She organized files into color-coded folders. She slept poorly. Ethan noticed. "You've been tense lately," he said one morning. "I'm fine," she replied. "Just busy." He didn't argue. He just watched. On Tuesday, she shut herself in the bedroom for the call. I sat in the living room, listening to the faint murmur of voices through the door. Calm, professional, polite. I caught fragments. Timeline escalation. Best interest. Documentation gap. When the door finally opened, Rachel stepped out slowly, like someone exiting a long tunnel. "How did it go?" Ethan asked. "Fine," she said. "They just want some additional materials." "Like what?" She avoided his eyes. "Emails, notes, a few clarifications." "Clarifications about what?" he pressed. She exhaled sharply. "Why are you interrogating me?" "I'm not," he said. "I'm asking," and it was it. She looked at him, really looked at him, and something flickered, fear, maybe, or calculation. "I'm handling it," she said. "I always have." That night, Ethan came to my room. He didn't knock. He just stood in the doorway like he used to when he was younger, uncertain but determined. "Dad," he said, "did you know she was keeping a separate set of notes?" I sat up slowly. "What kind of notes?" "About you," he said. "About me. About decisions she didn't tell anyone about." End quote. My chest tightened. "Where did you see them?" "She left her laptop open," he said. "I wasn't snooping. I just saw my name." He swallowed. "Some of the things she wrote aren't true." I waited. "She said you didn't object to selling the house," he continued. "You did. I remember." I nodded. "I did." "She said I agreed to take over finances," he said. "I never said that." I met his eyes. "What do you think is happening?" He shook his head. "I don't know, but it doesn't feel like help anymore." That was the moment I'd been waiting for, not the collapse, but the shift. "You don't have to decide anything right now," I said. "Just pay attention." He He nodded slowly. I am. The next week, Rachel's authority narrowed. Not publicly, quietly. Requests were delayed. Approvals required additional verification. A bank placed a temporary hold on a transfer pending review. An insurance provider asked for confirmation directly from me, not through her. Each time, Rachel explained it away. Routine. Glitch? Nothing to worry about. But the explanations were thinning. Ethan stopped deferring automatically. He asked questions. He double-checked. Did Dad really agree to this? Can you show me where that's documented? Why wasn't I copied on that email? Rachel grew defensive. I've been managing this alone, she said one night. I shouldn't have to justify every decision. You didn't have to, Ethan replied. Before. Thanks for watching. The word hung between them. Before. That weekend, Rachel packed an overnight bag. For space. I just need a break, she said. All this scrutiny is exhausting. Ethan nodded, conflicted. Okay. She left Friday afternoon. The house felt different immediately. Quieter. Lighter. Ethan and I ate dinner together at the table, neither of us speaking much. Afterward, he said, I think I need to talk to someone. Independently. I nodded. That sounds wise. Where? Did you plan this? He asked suddenly. I met his gaze. I planned not to stop it. He absorbed that. Why? Because if I had, I said, you would have defended her, and you would have been hurt when the truth came out. He looked down, jaw tight. I'm sorry. So am I said, but not for the reason you think. Rachel didn't come back Sunday night. On Monday morning, a final notice arrived. Not dramatic, not accusatory, a statement of findings, recommendations, a reallocation of authority pending further review. Rachel was removed from her role. Ethan read the letter twice, hands shaking slightly. She didn't tell me, he said. No, I replied. She wouldn't. He sat down heavily. What happens now? I thought about that. Now, I said, things slow down. He nodded. And you? I stay where I am, I said. He looked at me. You could take everything back. Yes, I said. But I won't. Why not? I considered the question carefully. Because you needed to see it without me pointing, I said. And because not every loss needs to be reversed to be meaningful. He sat quietly for a long time. I don't know how to fix this, he said finally. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You already started. Outside, the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the yard. The house still stood, damaged, changed, but no longer under someone else's control. And that, for now, was enough. Life didn't reset itself after Rachel left. There was no clean cut, no dramatic return to the way things had been before. What followed was quieter than that, a long, deliberate recalibration, like a structure being reoccupied room by room after an inspection finds it mostly sound but permanently altered. Rachel didn't fight the decision. That surprised Ethan more than it surprised me. She sent a brief email 2 days after the notice arrived. Polite, controlled. She said she needed time to process and hoped, eventually, we could move forward respectfully. There was no apology, no explanation, just distance. Ethan read the message 3 times, then closed his laptop and sat back in his chair. That's it? He asked. That's it, I said. He frowned. She's not even going to argue? She knows when a system has made up its mind, I replied. So do I. The house stayed quiet that week. No laptop clicking late into the night. No carefully scheduled days. The calendar on the fridge remained unchanged, a grid of empty squares. Ethan went to work every morning like nothing had happened. But I could see the weight he carried. He moved slower. He double-checked everything. He asked questions now, not just of me, but of himself. One evening, he stood in the doorway of the kitchen while I washed dishes. I talked to a lawyer today, he said. I glanced over. About what? About what my role was. About whether I did something wrong. And? They said I wasn't legally responsible, he replied. That I acted in good faith. I nodded. That's important. He hesitated. They also said that I should be careful who I trust with authority, even when it looks responsible. I turned off the faucet and dried my hands. That's a lesson most people learn the hard way. He looked at me. You already knew. Yes. And you still let it happen. Yes. He swallowed. Why? I leaned against the counter and considered my answer. Because if I had stopped it early, I said, you would have believed it was an overreaction. You would have defended her. And later, when things didn't add up, you would have blamed yourself for doubting her. He stared at the floor. Instead, I blame myself for not seeing it sooner. That will pass, I said. What wouldn't have passed is you losing faith in your own judgment. He looked up. You lost yours? I shook my head. No, I chose to set it aside. There's a difference. The safeguards continued doing their quiet work long after Rachel was gone. Accounts were reviewed, notes were compared, questions were asked, not in anger, but in sequence. I was interviewed once, briefly. A woman from oversight asked me if I felt harmed by the process. No, I said truthfully. She paused. Do you feel exploited? No, I said again. Then how would you describe it? I thought for a moment. Misplaced certainty. I don't know. She nodded, as if that made sense. My authority wasn't fully restored, and I didn't ask for it to be. Horizon Risk reached out a month later. They offered a limited consulting role, reviewing documentation, not visiting sites. You'd be an asset, Mark said on the phone. Low exposure, flexible. I declined. I'm stepping back, I told him, permanently. There was a pause. Are you sure? Yes. He didn't argue. If you change your mind, the door's open. After that, the days slowed. I took long walks in the mornings. I fixed things around the house that had been neglected. Small repairs, loose hinges, cracked grout, things that responded well to patience. Ethan started coming home earlier. We cooked together sometimes. Nothing elaborate, just food that required attention. One night, while we were eating, he said, I keep thinking about how easily I handed things over. That's normal, I said. It scares me, he admitted. How reasonable it all sounded. I nodded. That's how control works best, when it dresses itself up as care. He leaned back in his chair. Would you have done the same thing to me? The question was quiet, careful. No, I said. Why not? Because you would have known something was wrong, I replied. You would have pushed back. He frowned. You didn't. I smiled faintly. I didn't need to. He didn't fully understand that yet. He would. Rachel never returned to the house. She collected the rest of her things through a third party. Ethan watched from the window as boxes were loaded into a rental truck, his expression unreadable. She built her life around being necessary, he said softly. What happens when she's not? That's not your responsibility, I replied. He nodded, but I could tell the question lingered. As for me, my life grew smaller but not emptier. I no longer managed complex projects or made decisions that affected hundreds of people. I wasn't consulted. I wasn't deferred to, but I was present. I woke up without an alarm. I read books, cover to cover. I noticed the way the light moved through the house in the afternoons. One evening, Linda called. I heard things settled, she said. They did. I'm glad, she replied. You okay? I looked around the quiet kitchen. Yes, and I was. Because the truth was, I hadn't lost everything. I'd lost authority. I'd lost status. I'd lost the right to be automatically believed. What I hadn't lost was clarity. Ethan trusted himself again. That mattered more than whether anyone trusted me. A few weeks later, he told me he was moving out. Not abruptly, thoughtfully. I need to rebuild things on my own, he said, without anyone managing it for me. I smiled. That sounds healthy. He hesitated. You'll be okay here? I've been okay for a while, I said. On the day he moved, we stood in the driveway beside his car. Boxes stacked neatly in the back. He hugged me longer than usual. I'm sorry it took me so long, he said. I held him tightly. I'm not. He pulled back, confused. Because if you'd seen it earlier, I said, you wouldn't have learned what you needed to learn. He nodded slowly. I get that now. As he drove away, I felt a familiar ache, but it wasn't loss. It was release. That night, alone in the house, I sat at the kitchen table and listened to the quiet. I thought about all the versions of this story that could have ended differently, louder, more vindictive, more satisfying on the surface. I could have exposed everything immediately. I could have demanded my power back. I could have won, but winning would have cost my son his footing. So I chose something else. I chose to be the man who stepped aside so someone else could stand without shadows. People would say I faded. They'd say I let myself be diminished. They'd be wrong. I wasn't erased. I was repositioned. And sometimes, the strongest legacy a man can leave isn't proof that he was right. It's the quiet certainty that someone else is free because he was willing to let go.